I just found it like really interesting how because like she was considered like weird and like
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't like depict her body as like a female.
Interesting pieces of art that they learned about that they enjoyed. Cynthia. Hi, Sarah.
I thought it was interesting that there was a shift from like the structures being less like tombs and more like temples.
Mm-hmm.
Like with King Tut's tomb, it kind of like went back to like the older style of like had more of like the ornaments and things inside of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Good point. All right. Let's get cooking. Here we go. So, beginning the New Kingdom, here's the temple of, the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut. We will also look at her sculpture, how she was represented, and that the fact that it was actually destroyed. So, Hatshepsut was particularly exceptional pharaoh because she was a woman, like Cynthia mentioned. So her mortuary temple reflects her power. It's quite large. She was originally named regent for her stepson, Thutmose III. She was presumed to intend to rule until he reached his maturity, and then she would step aside. However, this did not happen. She seemed to have taken control and ruled from 1473 to 1458 BCE. So the location of this mortuary temple is further south in Egypt, indicating that in the New Kingdom you see a number of structures, monuments, and the capital itself move further down to what we consider Upper Egypt. Bless you. Is that a little distracting if I do that? Yeah. I'll just wait till you guys finish writing that bit. So, Hatshepsut's mummy has recently been discovered, or at least archaeologists hope that they found her mummy because her stepson, once he became pharaoh, carried out a campaign to destroy her memory, or any claims that she made of being a pharaoh or king. Her mummy may have been hidden away in the tomb of her nurse, so she would not be discovered and destroyed. So they found a mummy that's extraordinarily well preserved. All right, I'm going to click ahead now. So the key work that we're focusing on here is Hatshepsut with offering jars from the upper court of her mortuary temple. This work is made out of red granite. It's at the Met Museum in New York City currently. It's quite substantial in size. It's over 8 feet tall. And if you look at it closely, you can see that it's all fragmented, meaning that it's broken. So she's got cracks in her. So that reflects the fact that once Thutmose III became pharaoh, he did destroy a lot of Hatshepsut's memory through the destruction of her artwork. So as we can see from this artwork, she really did take on more of an appearance of a man, probably as a way to ensure or reassure her people that she was powerful enough and strong enough to rule. She wears the same kind of headdress as we saw previously in other pharaohs from the Old Kingdom. She has the false beard. In the sculpture you don't see it, but in the picture in your text, she has a false beard too. Even though she was a woman, she's holding on to 2 offering jars and also kneeling. The offering jars and the kneeling pose are things that a pharaoh would only do when making offerings to the gods or to the divine. A pharaoh would never kneel to anyone but a god. So this shows us that she's in a state of perpetual offering and giving to the gods. All right, I'm going to pause. I have a little video clip. So next we're going to look at the Temple of Amun-Re and the hypostyle hall of Karnak, in Karnak, Egypt. This is also from an area farther south in Egypt. This entire complex takes up hundreds of acres. you can see that it is enclosed. It would have been a restricted area, primarily for priests. Also, the pharaoh could presumably enter, especially because the pharaohs were often primarily patrons of the site. So, some of the site does survive. Currently in modern times, we have some columns and remnants of the structures, but most of it did not survive. So this is over here is what it would look like as a reconstruction. So here you could see the temple of Amun-Re right here in the middle at the center. And you can also see the sacred lake back here, which refers back to the creation story from the water Egyptians. So the story begins with the first waters, or the early waters, and then land came from those waters. So presumably this structure recreates the creation story Egyptians. We'll focus on the structure here, the Temple of Amun-Re. You could see a number of pylons or gateways that one would have to go through, plus pylons on either side of the temple itself. A number of pharaohs contributed to this, so Hatshepsut, also Thutmose III, Thutmose I, Ramses, Seti later on. Okay. So this is a reconstruction of the hypostyle hall. Hypostyle hall is a hall where columns support the roof. Remember, we're in a period of that post and lintel type of construction. So you want to make sure that all of the columns are relatively close together so that the roof maintains full support. Another invention here in this image down here is that we have an example of a clerestory, which are windows on top here along, so that light would be able to enter through. So this type of construction has to have these smaller columns or pylons and these bigger ones for these windows to be made. Otherwise, the temple would be quite dark. All right. So yeah, there's the example of our post and lintel. Yeah. Let me know if I could change slides. Okay. So these are how the columns look today. These columns look very natural. They look like they have flowering tops. So you can see here. So often these columns were a reflection of what artists and architects saw in the natural world. We believe that a lot of these architectural forms originated in what was seen in nature, which is not unusual. So on these columns, we see that we have something called sunken relief, which is basically, rather than carving in traditional relief style, where you would reveal the figures by carving around them, these are actually sunken into the column to preserve the bulging shape of the column on either side. Otherwise, if you carved in the traditional fashion, it would look very bumpy on the sides. So sunken relief provides more of a consistent look on the outer portion of the column. Okay, moving on. This is where things get a little weird in the New Kingdom. We see a development of a new style of art and making called, or referring to the Amarna style. It's called the Amarna style. Here we start to see figures of pharaohs being a little bit abstracted. A lot of conspiracy is behind this type of artwork. You probably heard, oh, that wasn't a pharaoh, that was actually an alien, that type of stuff. I don't know if you've heard about that, but I definitely have. Anyway,
Didn't the book say something about that they thought it was like kind of like making fun of or something like that?
I don't know if making fun of them.
I don't know. I don't know what the word was used. It was like something along the lines of like they didn't think like the pharaoh like commissioned them.
Okay.
But then like I said like something like they explained like that they were made from like expensive like materials.
Mhm.
That it was most likely that they did commission them. But I know the book said something like they thought like it was like not commissioned by the pharaoh. Something like that along those lines.
I mean, it could be possible, but I do believe that the pharaoh did commission at least some of these sculptures.
Yeah, that's what they were saying, like, because it was so expensive,
Okay.
the material, that they had to, but they just thought that it was weird, like a weird style.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a weird style. And with the weird style also comes a new religion. So, kind of moving on and looking at the temple complex that we just saw in Karnak, that the priest and the religion in Egypt becomes extremely powerful, that the priests controlled a lot of these resources, and that the priests themselves were becoming very powerful. So we see a dramatic change to a more monotheistic system, and we see this with the pharaoh called Akhenaten. He worships a god called Aten, which who could tell me what Aten is? How was Aten described in the text? Okay, so basically Aten was a disk, a sun disk, a single sun disk. We'll talk more about him in a second, but here we see a full portrait of Akhenaten. Akhenaten means he who is of service to Aten. So he's referring through his name back to his new god, or this new important figure in Egyptian theology that he is now controlling and that he's in charge of it.
Didn't he change his name?
No, that was King Tut.
Oh, okay.
Because he we'll get to it, but he took back the religion that they previously had from Akhenaten to back to the Amen religion. Sorry. I need coffee or something. I'm stuttering like crazy. All right, anyway. So as I mentioned, we see a dramatic change in the artistic style in this period. As you can see in this figure, he has very curvy hips, almost looking like a female figure, slightly slack belly or bulging belly, more narrow shoulders, and elongated face. So there's a number of questions as to what's going on here in terms of artistic style. Is it just a break from the past? Is the new style indicating a new religion? Or is it some kind of disorder that Akhenaten suffered from that's being celebrated here? Some people have put ideas forth. Some of them even went as far as to speculate if he was an alien, like I said. All right. Oop. So most likely, to answer those questions, this was just a deliberate artistic change to reflect this new belief system. Akhenaten also founded the new capital called Akhetaten, which is a site in Arna. This is often referred to as the Arna style. Akhetaten means horizon of Aten. So everything began to be renamed for this new sun disk, this god. Previously, everything had been named for Amen. Now everything's for Aten. It could get very confusing. His original name meant Amun is satisfied. Oh yeah, you're right. Amun is satisfied, but of course he had to change it due to his new religion. I stand corrected. Okay. I know this is a lot to write down, so I'll wait a minute. So how do we feel about this new god, Aten? The fact that he's a disc. I think he resembles like the sun, right? Going back to the ray and, having everything revolve around the sun, but why create a new name, new image of this god? Why do you think? To be original, to stand out in history? Yes, Sierra.
I feel like him like having this new God that he personally has like a deep connection with. It's like everyone's like, oh, he's the only one who has this connection with this God that makes him so like special.
Okay, yeah, that's a good perspective. All right. I'm moving on. Okay, so the key work here in this section is Akhenaten represented with his wife Nefertiti, meaning the beautiful one has come, and their 3 daughters. So here Akhenaten's holding one daughter, and then there's another and another. You can see that they also have these curvy hips, elongated faces and heads. The 3 daughters almost have egg-shaped heads, and you could see that they're in an outdoor pavilion. It looks quite nice, like they're enjoying their day. They have wine carafes over here, holders of wine or some type of liquid. But most importantly in this, you have, right here, you have your sun disk, you have Aten up here. So the new god didn't take any forms of animals or humans like we saw in the Old Kingdom, like for example Horus appearing as a falcon, but he came as a disc. And so the idea that Akhenaten would represent himself as almost genderless, having both female and male characteristics, also may refer back to Aten, also this disc being genderless. So here you see the sun rays also providing health or life. They're clearly figures of status, sitting on thrones with their feet elevated. Why do you think their feet are elevated? What can you assume by that? That since they're so royal and people of high status, why wouldn't their feet touch the ground? Yeah, Shannon.
Is it because the ground is like considered holy, or like either not 2000 like either is considered holy or is like considered unclean, so they want to keep their feet up?
It's the second one. It was considered unclean. They're pharaohs, they're god kings. They're not going to walk on dirt. Their feet need to be elevated to be forever pristine. All right. So here we have more examples of that style. I personally enjoy this style. I think it's a nice change of pace for what we've seen throughout, art history so far. That's pretty cool. All right, and then we have the sculpture of Queen Nefertiti, painted limestone. It is unfinished. It's from the Marna style. And of course, she's the wife of Akhenaten. This is truly a beautiful sculpture. All right. And then lastly, we're going to talk about or focus in on the last pharaoh for this chapter. So I'm gonna flip here. What's going on? So the last key pharaoh we're gonna focus on in this chapter is Tutankhamun, who's known in pop culture as King Tut. His tomb, as mentioned previously, is relatively modest. He died probably unexpectedly in a very young age, at 18 years old, after ruling for about a decade. So he became a pharaoh very young, and he also died very young. He did a couple of important things. So as we talked about or mentioned previously, he changed back religion to the original religion of Egypt. So he abandoned the worship of Aten. He died rather suddenly. That's why he has a relatively modest tomb. It seems like it was put together very quickly, and it is the only tomb to be found in complete shape. And that's like how he would look. It had been robbed a couple of times, but most of the large substantial things in his tombs were still there, including his coffin and including a lot of other objects that give us a sense of how rich he was and how rich these pharaohs have been. So at first, people thought he was murdered. They suspect foul play, like we saw in the video a week ago. But recent DNA analysis and analysis of his mummy indicates that it was probably malaria that killed him, which was a very common illness at that time. A key work that I want to show and focus in on is his throne and footstool. So many people know of his mask and his sarcophagus, his tomb that we just saw, but the key work that I want to focus in is on this footstool and throne. We see him looking here. This is the back of the throne, this image right here. We see him looking quite young here, seated on the throne with a footstool, just like the one we see here. So it's pretty cool seeing the image of the footstool on the footstool, or of the throne on the throne. I'm so confused right now. Okay. Sorry about that. So just like Khafre's, which we saw in the Old Kingdom, it has lions on either side of it, symbols of authority and power. And it also continues to have Aten in it too, the Aten, the sun disk. So we see some continuity in terms of iconography. We also see his young wife off to the side, and her name, which is down here, contains the name Amen. So now we know that we've returned to the previous religion, the older religion, and that they've abandoned or seemingly abandoned the new religion that we saw in Amarna. However, some of that iconography still continues. And finally, we look down here at the footstool. You can see that, there are images of bound captives, which very literally would show you how powerful King Tut was by placing his feet directly on these captives. Tutankhamun's name also includes a reference to that previous god Amen. Both Tutankhamun and his wife refer back to that earlier god. They seem to have left Aten behind, with the exception of a little bit of iconography left on the throne itself. All right, here we go. So this is just a very nice summary for you guys. Let's go through it one by one. How about that? Because I didn't notice the text changes colors. So we make a big deal of prehistory and history because they lend to right How valid is that distinction? Who wants to tell me? The distinction between prehistory and history. So Old Kingdom, New Kingdom. Anyone? Hmm? We're doing like a review right now.
What was the question?
Right there. Yeah, Madison.
So are you trying to say like because they have records and stuff now, like they use cuneiform and whatever?
There, yes, and also, so kind of what I'm asking is like, what in these two periods, give me like some examples of artworks that have that recorded down. So like in the Near East we had steles, remember? So what do we have in the Old Kingdom and New Kingdom that we could learn from and that we know all this information from? Yeah? We have tombs. What do we have in those tombs?
Stuff that they, like, pharaohs, like,
Yes. What do we have on the walls?
hieroglyphics.
Yes. But we have all of these pictographs and hieroglyphs too that basically tell a story. So it's the narrative that we have. So through these images, we get the whole story. What else do we have in terms of art that, gives us, lets us read history from Egyptian times? Yes, Sierra. Yes, that, because they have hieroglyphs on them as well. But what about something we looked at last class? Yeah, the temple works too. All of these things are correct answers. They're not wrong answers. Madison, yeah.
So like the palace in Narmar?
Yeah. That's the example I was mainly thinking about. Because also you have to think about like the big thing, the big scale thing, you have your palette. But then within those palettes you have those registrars. And it's almost like chapters of a book, you break it down like that. So there is a genuine change in the way things happen or the kinds of things that happened. Prehistory is far from uneventful. So yeah, Egyptians were somewhat intelligent and used whatever means to create. So they used a lot of the material that was around them, sandstone, limestone, even importing diorite and getting granite. They worked very utilitarian in their society. So kind of like the Near East people presenting to their temples with offerings, they basically revolved their entire theology around their gods too, and creating these temples and monuments for their gods. And then we have sarcophagus. Oh, I want to ask, what's a Ben stone? Ben stone. So going back to last class's lecture about pyramids, who could tell me what a Ben stone is? You guys are scaring me. Test is in a week. So the Ben stone was the capstone on top of a pyramid, made out of limestone usually, painted gold for the sun god, Re. What? Re. Ra-Re. It's pronounced Re though. And then we had gods in the form of animals, horse, falcon. It's pretty self-explanatory. All right. So it's important to know ancient Egyptian art was an art of permanence. It did not change. It was meant to be seen forever, rule forever, and that the rule would continue to the end of time. Reality was complex to the Egyptians. Artists did not go for change, but more for tradition and continuity. So with writing, naturally came politics and religion that called for pharaohs. Expresses multi-faced ways for the king, human manifestations of the gods, a god in his own right, a beneficent ruler, and an emblem to life itself. Royal art and their funerary objects are what we know along with their records, because that's what we found when, archaeologists excavated tombs. Okay. So again, kind of relating back to the Near East, because this is happening at the same time. Animals are being domesticated, farming's happening, farming is rich along the Nile, fertile soil. So this creates a lot of population. So what is the new threat because of all of this? It's man, overpopulation, and then battles. In Egypt, we see a civilization that is regarded as rigid and very conservative in the history of mankind. All right, so Tuesday, we have a review day. Come prepared. It's really important. Pay attention in these lectures. I have them recorded. And then please read the text. That text is very important. I know it's very bulky, but here's your homework. Quiz 3 due at midnight Monday. There is a discussion board for this chapter, okay? It's already posted. I'll go over it in a second and what I am looking from you guys for it. And then study for test 1. Study guide is also posted on Canvas. And I'll show you that right now.